Deep in a French cliffside, a cave sat, sealed by solid rock, for over 20,000 years. No light, no air, no living thing had entered since the Ice Age. Three friends out for a casual walk, not scientists, felt a strange draft slipping through a crack too narrow to enter. What they found on the other side would rewrite everything we thought we knew about ancient humans. The crack in the cliff. The cave sits on a limestone cliff above what used to be the riverbed of the Ardèche, inside a stretch of gorges in southeastern France. It is now considered one of the most important prehistoric art sites on the planet, and UNESCO granted it World Heritage status in June 2014. The three cavers were not scientists. They were simply exploring the gorges as a hobby when they picked up on a faint pull of air moving through solid rock. The kind of small clue most people would walk right past without a second thought. That pull of air led them to a hole barely wide enough for a person to fit through. And on the other side of it sat a cave system that had not felt open air in tens of thousands of years. Word spread through the world of archaeology almost immediately once the paintings were confirmed as genuine. Researchers who arrived in the following weeks knew right away that something about this discovery did not match anything they had studied before. The site was later named after Jean-Marie Chauvet, even though two other people were standing right beside him when it happened. What still puzzled everyone at that early stage was a much bigger question, one that would take years of careful digging to answer. How had a cave this size stayed completely untouched for so long, without a single person or animal ever wandering inside? What sealed the cave shut? The answer came down to a single event: a massive rockfall that crashed down and buried the only entrance to the cave. Scientists studying the site later pinned down roughly when that collapse happened. Using more than 250 radiocarbon samples taken from charcoal, bone, and torch marks, researchers found evidence of two separate periods when people visited the cave. One stretch running from about 37,000 to 33,500 years ago, and a second stretch from about 31,000 to 28,000 years ago. The team believes the first rockfall sealed off part of the cave near the end of that earlier period, and two more collapses closed the entrance completely, not long after the second group of visitors left. After that final collapse, nothing larger than an insect could have found a way inside. That single event turned the cave into something close to a time capsule. No rain reached the paintings. No wind wore down the pigment. No animal tracked mud across the floor or knocked debris loose from the ceiling above. The temperature and moisture inside stayed steady for thousands of years in a row, protected from every weather change happening just a few feet away on the surface. That kind of stillness is almost impossible to find anywhere else on Earth, and it is exactly what lets so much survive in such incredible shape. Inside the darkness. Once researchers began mapping the interior, they found a cave system far bigger than anyone guessed from the outside. Chauvet is made up of 6 connected chambers, stretching across roughly 1,300 feet of rock, and it holds more than 1,000 paintings, along with carvings cut directly into some of the walls. The animals painted across those walls were not the usual calm grazing creatures found in most other ancient cave art around the world. Alongside horses, mammoths, and rhinos, the walls of Chauvet are covered in predators, including cave lions, cave bears, hyenas, and even a leopard. Animals that almost never show up in this kind of art anywhere else from the same period. The floor of the cave told its own story once scientists looked closely. Soft clay ground still held the paw prints of cave bears that once slept there, along with the wide, shallow dips where those same bears curled up to rest for the night. Fossilized bones were scattered everywhere researchers looked, including bear skulls and the curved horns of an ibex. One set of footprints belonging to a child, along with a possible wolf or dog track running alongside it, sat pressed into the clay, exactly where they were left, more than 25,000 years ago. None of it had been disturbed in all that time, and figuring out just how rare that kind of preservation really is would change how scientists thought about early human art completely. The paintings that shouldn't exist. For decades before Chauvet was found, most experts believed early cave art started out crude and simple, then slowly improved over thousands of years as techniques got passed down. That idea came from a well-known historian named André Leroy-Gourhan, who laid out this theory of slow, gradual progress in a major book on prehistoric art published in 1965. It made sense on paper, and almost nobody in the field seriously questioned it for 30 years straight. Chauvet broke that theory apart the moment researchers studied the walls closely. The paintings inside were not simple outlines or rough scratches. Artists had scraped the stone clean before painting to create a smooth, pale surface that made their colors stand out sharper. They used the natural bumps and curves of the rock to give animals a sense of depth and muscle. In some panels, an animal was drawn with extra legs or a second head slightly out of position, so that when viewed by flickering torchlight, the image seemed to shift and move like an early form of animation. None of that fit the old idea of primitive beginnings. It looked like the work of artists who already had generations of skill behind them, long before anyone thought that level of skill was possible. Before we move further into this, if you're finding this interesting, take a second to subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Figuring out how old these paintings actually were became the next major hurdle scientists needed to clear, and the method they used to solve it would end up settling the entire debate for good. The science that proved the age. Researchers turned to radiocarbon dating to pin down exact numbers, testing samples of charcoal pulled directly from the black drawings on the walls, along with torch marks and bones scattered on the cave floor. By the early 2010s, more than 80 separate radiocarbon dates had been collected from the site. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2012 confirmed that the paintings were made during the Aurignacian period, somewhere between 30,000 and 32,000 years ago, based partly on rock slide analysis around what researchers believe is the cave's only entrance. Later work expanded that picture even further. Some of the oldest black drawings at Chauvet have now been dated to roughly 36,000 years ago, making them among the earliest confirmed figurative art ever discovered anywhere on Earth. That number placed Chauvet thousands of years ahead of Lascaux, the cave in central France that had long been treated as the gold standard of ancient art before Chauvet came along. Suddenly, the timeline that scientists had trusted for decades needed a full rewrite, and it raised a question that reached far beyond just one cave in France. Why this changed everything we thought about early humans If humans 36,000 years ago were already capable of shading, layering, and creating the illusion of motion on a cave wall, then the whole idea of primitive early humans slowly fumbling toward basic skill needed serious rethinking. These were people living through the last ice age, hunting dangerous animals for survival, and still finding the time and mental capacity to create art this advanced. Some researchers now believe the cave was never used as a place to live at all. There is no sign of long-term habitation, no scattered layers of daily trash or worn living space near a fire pit that got used for years on end. Instead, many scientists suspect Chauvet served some kind of ritual or spiritual purpose, a place people visited specifically to create these images, rather than somewhere they slept or ate regular meals. One detail makes that idea feel even more personal. A series of handprints appear scattered through different chambers of the cave, some painted as solid shapes, and others left as outlines where paint was blown around a hand pressed flat against the stone. Researchers noticed that one specific person, identifiable by a slightly bent pinky finger, left prints in multiple locations throughout the cave. That means it is possible to trace a single human being's path through total darkness more than 30,000 years after they walked it, using nothing but the marks their own hand left behind. Even with that discovery, plenty of basic questions about who these artists actually were remain completely unanswered. The search for other caves like it. Once Chauvet proved that advanced art existed this early, researchers began wondering whether it was truly a one-of-a-kind site, or simply the first example anyone happened to find. Starting in 2008, members of the team studying Chauvet expanded their work to other rock art sites scattered along the Ardèche River gorges, under the direction of researcher Julien Mani. One of those sites, known as Point's Cave, showed drawing styles that looked strikingly similar to what was found inside Chauvet, hinting that the same group of people, or at least a closely connected culture, may have decorated more than one cave in the region. Another nearby site, called Deux Ouvertures Cave, was studied for the same reason. This wider search became known as the Datation Gratis Orniz project, and it aims to understand the full pattern of Ice Age art across that stretch of France, rather than treating Chauvet as an isolated event standing completely alone. The work is slow, since each new cave needs its own careful dating and mapping before any comparisons can be trusted. So far, the project has produced results that help place Chauvet inside a bigger regional picture, showing that Ice Age communities living along the Ardèche were likely connected to each other in ways researchers had not considered before. Even with these newer sites providing extra clues, nothing found nearby has matched the scale or condition of what sits inside Chauvet itself. And protecting that condition became its own major challenge once the world found out the cave existed. Protecting what the rockfall saved. News of the discovery spread fast, and researchers immediately thought back to what had happened at Lascaux decades earlier. That cave, found in 1940, had been open to the public for years, before scientists realized that visitors were slowly destroying it. Body heat, breath, and light from thousands of tourists caused mold and a type of green fungus to spread across the ancient paintings, damaging artwork that had survived for tens of thousands of years before people ever walked through the front door. Lascaux was eventually closed for good once the damage became clear. Determined not to repeat that mistake, French authorities sealed Chauvet off from public access almost immediately after its discovery, and it has remained closed ever since. Only a small number of researchers are allowed inside each year, working under strict limits on time and equipment to avoid changing the cave's temperature or humidity, even slightly. To give the public a way to experience the site without risking the original, a full-scale replica called the Espace de Restitution de la Grotte Chauvet was built nearby, recreating the chambers and paintings in careful detail. The real cave remains locked away, exactly as the rockfall left it, while millions of visitors instead walk through its copy. What scientists still do not know. Nobody has identified exactly who painted inside Chauvet or what specific beliefs drove them to create these images so far underground, away from any natural light. Deep in the furthest chamber sits one especially strange image, a shape combining the lower body of a woman with the head and front legs of a bison, hanging on a section of rock that juts down from the ceiling like a natural pendant. Researchers still argue over what that image was meant to represent, whether it points to an early belief system, a story passed down through a group, or something else entirely that modern minds may never fully piece together. There is also the matter of the two separate groups who used the cave thousands of years apart. Scientists know a first group painted the earliest black drawings, and a second group arrived roughly 5,000 years later and added more art of their own before the final rockfalls sealed the entrance for good. Whether that second group knew anything about the people who came before them or simply stumbled onto the same cave independently is still an open question. Researchers continue running new tests using improved dating methods and three-dimensional scanning tools, hoping each new pass through the data brings them closer to real answers. What it all adds up to. None of this rests on guesswork or a story stretched further than the evidence allows. Every detail traces back to peer-reviewed radiocarbon studies, geological surveys of the collapsed entrance, and decades of careful fieldwork carried out by real research teams working across multiple French institutions. The cave remains closed to the public today, protected from the kind of mold and damage that ruined parts of Lascaux once tourists started walking through it. Visitors can only experience a full-scale replica built nearby, while the original chambers stay locked away exactly as they were left. What began as three friends chasing a faint draft of air through a crack in a cliff turned into one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the last century. Proof that human creativity was already remarkably advanced tens of thousands of years before anyone assumed it was possible. A rockfall that could have destroyed everything instead protected it perfectly, freezing one small slice of the Ice Age in place until 1994 arrived and cracked it back open. Scientists are still finding new details buried in that darkness, and there is a real chance the next discovery pulled from those walls reshapes the story all over again. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.